Hello, everybody. Dan Lucas with Credo here, and I am back for another day of tax credits. And we're in this 50 states in 50 days series. Um, and today we're doing New York. And New York was admitted to the Union on, let's see, July 26, 1788, and was the state admitted right after Virginia, which is the video that we did yesterday. And as promised, New York has a lot of different tax credits. I think they just have a lot of different laws on the books in general, New York City and New York State. But they definitely have, a very robust and actually very deep. So they have a very wide breadth of tax credits, and it also goes very deep. So I'm going to read through the business tax credits and kind of leave it at that. And then I'm only going to name some of the credits, and some of the credits I'm going to go a little bit deeper into, the ones that I think really strike a chord with me more than some others. Okay. Again, if we ever need to go deeper into something, send us a question, make a comment, send me an email, anything like that, to do a little research. We'll do a little research on a case-by-case basis based on somebody's need, but I'm not necessarily going to go into depth on every single tax credit in every state. I'm just going to go into depth on the ones that I feel like might be very good, robust credits that you don't want to miss, or are going to be more applicable to a broader audience. Okay, hopefully that's fair. Okay, so New York State tax credits. And you're lucky because today I'm not going to try to do any crazy New York accents. Well, I shouldn't promise that because I might toward the end. But anyway, when I think of New York, I just think of like energy, and it makes me kind of feel aggressive and just kind of ready to kill it. When I used to do business meetings in Manhattan, man, that place has just got some energy to it. I mean, you just feel like you just want to compete. If you're a competitive person, you go to Manhattan, you feel like you're home. I mean, it's just a great place to be, and it has a great vibe to it if you've never been there before, especially for business people. So anyway, those are my opening remarks. Okay, so let's go to the tax credits. I'm going to go through in kind of alphabetical order since there's so many. So they have an alcoholic beverage production credit, and that one's kind of interesting. I mean, there's a lot of people that might be watching this video that are into that. You have to be a registered distributor under Article 18 of the tax law, and you have to produce in New York State. But it looks like you have to, let's see, in order to qualify, you have to do 60 million or fewer gallons of beer. It's a lot of beer. 60 million or fewer gallons of cider. I know someone who does cider who might maybe want to relook at where they're producing their cider. And 20 million or fewer gallons of wine. And the last one is 800,000 or fewer gallons of liquor. Credit is equal to 14 cents per gallon for the first 500,000 gallons of beer, cider, wine, or liquor produced in New York State in tax year, and 4.5 cents per gallon for each additional gallon over 500,000 produced in New York State in the same tax year. So, if you're in that business or producing that or invested in something like a small startup or something, you might want to bring it to the attention of whoever's running that little startup business. I know a lot of people invest in these things on the side. They invest in like cannabis and breweries and things like that kind of on the side. So, this could apply to all that stuff. And if you have nothing to do with any of this stuff, it's probably not relevant. Okay, so then we have the alternative fuels and electric vehicle recharging property credit. If you have an electric vehicle, look at that. There's automatic external defibrillator credit. There's a biofuel production credit. There's the brownfield credits, which we have talked about before in other states. This is kind of a multi-state credit, well, as far as kind of how they use the terminology. But it's basically an environmental type of cleanup credit. So if you think you might have anything in that area, you want to look at that. We have the clean heating fuel credit. We have the conservation easement credits. We talked about conservation easements before. That has to do with contributing land and preserving land. As you know, Biden has the new 30-30 program where he wants to see 30% of all land in the United States preserved and protected by the year 2030. At least that's what I think it is. And so that's becoming bigger and bigger. there's a big federal credit, or sorry, there's a federal deduction for these conservation easements nationwide. And it doesn't matter what state it comes in to get a federal credit. So no matter where you're paying taxes, you can get the credit federally, but not every state has it. So New York State does. So you can double dip on it. Let's see, there's the Economic Transformation Facility Redevelopment Program Tax Credit. And let's see, that is, you have to do some research on the Empire State Development website. Well, it's actually called the Economic Transformation Program at Empire State Development's website. But effectively, it has to do with a psychiatric facility. It's a huge credit, but a lot of you are probably not in that kind of area. We have the Apprenticeship Tax Credit, which we have talked about before in other states. And this is really cool because this is something that's certified by the New York State Department of Labor. And the credit can be, it's for, it's an apprenticeship program, so you have to read about the details on that. But it kind of has a graduated scale going up. So if you have people that are in the apprenticeship program, you can get credits up to $6,000 per year. Okay, so that's pretty big credit actually. And somebody at the apprentice level may not be coming out of pocket a lot, so that could knock off a big part of that expense. And if it's for a disadvantaged youth apprentice, which I don't know the definition of that, you have to look that up, you get an extra $1,000 on top of the normal credit you would get. So that's pretty neat. And I know a lot of people that are entrepreneurs and business owners and stuff, they're really into the mentoring, just as kind of a force of nature type personality. They're really into the mentoring and helping others and bringing people up, and making apprentices or having apprentices is always good because you're going to need somebody to take over some of the duties you're doing anyway, and you're going to have an exit plan at some point. So I'm all about having an apprenticeship, especially if they're giving us tax deductions or tax credits. All right, we have a commercial production credit, and let's see, that would be for motion picture and television development. Okay, so that's like the film and tax credit that we've talked about before in other states. They do have a specific film production credit and a film post-production credit. So if you don't know the difference, I mean, one is the production credit is expenses while you're filming and things like that. And then the other credit would be like, you bring all the you bring 8 hours of footage back and you get it to a 2-hour movie or a 2-hour documentary, whatever, right? But again, it can be used for commercials, anything where you're producing digital content, video content, things like that. And we something to look at. They have 3 different credits in this area, which means they're trying to capture it for a lot of people and really spur on that activity. At least I would assume that's what it's traditionally used for. So they're trying to make sure that if you're doing anything like that, that you get one of these 3 credits, is my assumption. All right, they have the Jobs Retention Program credit. So again, I think a lot of people are pretty familiar with the CARES Act and things of that nature. And even in the 2016 Tax Act, they had some job retention credits in there on the federal level. They'd have them here on New York level. Look into that. I mean, if you have employees, look into it, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to hire people. It just means that you haven't let people off, okay? And so look at it, see if you qualify for it. I mean, some of these, just take a look at it. It doesn't take but 10 seconds. Or ask your payroll provider if it's something you qualify for. A lot of times a payroll provider will know the answer right off the bat, and sometimes they'll even just do it automatic for you if you ask for it. All right, we have the musical and theatrical production credit. No surprise there. New York's very typically good at, well, not good, but typically very, a lot of their legislation supports this industry. It says here that the credit is 25% of the sum of qualified production expenditures and transportation expenditures. It's a qualified musical and theatrical production company, or you have to be a qualified musical and theatrical production company, and you have to have received a certificate of tax credit from Empire State Development. So again, a lot of people probably, it's pretty general and pretty vague as to what a musical and theatrical production company is, as far as I can see. So anybody in that area, or if you know somebody in that area, you might want to bring this to their attention. All right, we've got the Empire Zone credits. Again, very, very popular right now in all states and federal are these economic zones or opportunity zones where they're trying to give people a hand up to take some of these communities, if you will, or different geographic zones and pull them up to prosperity, okay? And they have the Easy Employment Incentive Credit, the Easy Investment Credit, the Easy Employment Incentive Credit for the financial industry. Interesting. New York has obviously a huge financial industry. And the Easy Investment Tax Credit for the financial services industry, okay? So let's see if it's, I'd have to dig into that to see what the difference is, but needless to say, if any of these sound like something that you might be in the middle of, it's worth checking out. Let's see, outside of the opportunity zone, so those were for the Empire Zone or opportunity zones. They have the Employee Training Incentive Program Tax Credit. Again, we've talked about training and retraining kind of tax credits in other states. If you're training employees, looks like New York has some tax credits for that. They have the Employer Provided Childcare Credit. If you're offering childcare benefits at your work, you're going to want to check that out. They have the Employment Incentive Credit. And let's see what that is. That is, you're entitled to this credit if you or your business qualified for the investment tax credit and you've increased your average number of employees in New York State to at least 101% of your number of employees in New York State during your base year. So it looks like if you've hired people, probably something in your wheelhouse. And how much is the credit? It says the percentage of the original investment credit based on which the investment tax credit was allowed. So we have to do a little calculation there. Credit is refundable. Remember, refundable means you don't have to actually owe tax to get the money. That's a good thing. And it includes shareholders of New York S corporations who qualify as owners of a new business. Okay, pretty cool. Looks like they have some record keeping requirements that you have to do. But you know, if you're not keeping good records, you may have other problems. Let's see. They also have an employment incentive credit for that's just specific to the financial services industry. They have an employment of persons with disabilities credit. So if you have somebody that you're employing that has disabilities, look into that. They have the Excelsior Jobs Program Tax Credit. And that is a refundable credit. And you're entitled to it if your business has been approved by Empire State Development, ESD, to participate in the Excelsior Jobs Program and has received a certificate of tax credit. So something you got to apply for in advance. And it's equal to, but it says the credit is equal to the sum of 4 components, and those components are pretty not worth going into. It's a little too niche. All right, let's go to, I'm going to go to now to F. So we have the Farmers School Tax Credit, the Farm Donations to Food Pantries Credit, and the Farm Workforce Retention Credit. Looks like they got three credits for anybody that's in farming. And you know, believe it or not, a lot of kind of millionaire next door types or entrepreneurs actually get out of the city after they exit their business or just made enough money, and they all seem to love starting farms. They just seem to be, you know, you can look at business and make an analogy to farming as far as business, growing things, you know, planting seeds, growing things, letting them flourish, kind of, you know, stepping back and looking at it. A lot of similarities. So I think some people might chuckle when we talk about the credits that work for farmers, but you'd be surprised how many people kind of like to do farming when they retire or become financially independent. All right, so there's also a general corporation tax credit, which by the name of it is not very helpful as far as letting us know what it is. But it looks like they have a lot of, it looks like this is covering New York City income tax credits. And so the list on that is Child and Dependent Care Credit, Earned Income Credit, Enhanced Real Property Tax Credit, Household Credit, School Tax Credit, Variable. So one is fixed and one's variable on the school tax credits. And then they have a New York City Unincorporated Business Tax Credit. Looks like you have to be a full year New York City resident to get these. So any of those kind of strike a chord with you, look into that. Those are just New York City credits like we talked about before. New York has a ton of credits statewide and especially in New York City. All right, they also have a Hire a Veteran credit. I've talked about that before. Big fan of veterans as just great people to work for you, great training. They have an historic barn rehabilitation credit. Again, a lot of historic type credits or historic rehabilitation credits in the original 13 colonies. New York is no exception. They have an investment tax credit. They have an investment tax credit for the financial services industry. What is the investment tax credit? Now, if you remember back, we talked about one of the credits had a precursor of the investment tax credit. And so let's read off what that is. So who's eligible for this? You're entitled to this credit if you or your business place qualified property into service during the tax year. When it says qualified property, what that means to me is fixed assets, equipment, vehicles, things like that. It says, how much is the credit? The ITC, investment tax credit, is a percentage of the investment credit base. Okay, you have to look into that, see what that is. And it says it is refundable for new businesses. So if you're a new business, you're not making money yet, which a lot of new businesses are like that, it's refundable, which means you can still get the money as a credit, even if you don't owe tax, okay? Whenever you see refundable credits, take notice, okay? Because those are basically like subsidies, okay? It's like subsidies or grants, okay, versus just tax credits that offset a tax liability. All right, I get real excited about refundable credits because you don't actually have to owe tax to get the money. Again, it's like a grant. It's found money. All right, they also have an investment tax credit for the financial services industry. So obviously there's a lot of these tax credits. They are either gearing toward the financial services industry, which, you know, whether they need it or not is arguable to maybe some people, but either way, they're supporting that industry. Okay, that industry is extremely important to the state of New York, extremely important. Okay, so the fact that they're supporting that doesn't surprise me. All right, we have the Life Sciences Research and Development Tax Credit, R&D tax credits, not uncommon. Talked about those before. They have the Long-Term Care Insurance Credit and the Low-Income Housing Credit. No surprise there on those two things. Low-income housing credit is, you know, you invest in low-income housing, et cetera, et cetera. Doesn't really sound all that sexy sometimes. Excuse my French, but you know, they can pay out very nice dividends and also tax credits. So sometimes the more boring real estate is, the better. Okay, maybe something to look into if you got some extra money laying around and you're looking to invest. They have the Manufacturer's Real Property Tax Credit. Assuming that is going toward a facility, a manufacturing facility in New York. Minimum wage reimbursement credit. Let's see what that is. Let's say that's a refundable credit. And if you employed students in New York State for tax years beginning after 2014 and before, well, it looks like, I don't know why this is still on their list. It looks like it expired December 2018. So sorry about that. We'll skip that one. All right, now we're down to N on the alphabet. We got the New York City Unincorporated Business Tax Credit and the New York Youth Jobs Program Tax Credit. That's kind of neat. That sounds like something you might be able to just get involved with in advance, and then the tax credit would, well, you know, get involved with it to kind of help your business because they might have some pipelines there, some talent, and obviously get a tax credit as well. Now this one looks like it goes through the end of 2022 right now. It doesn't mean that's when it ends. It just means that's when it's set to expire now. It can always be renewed or continued. But this looks like, let's see, you've got, you hire qualified employees between the ages of 16 and 24. Qualified employees must start work between January 1st and December 31st of that year. And you have to receive a final certificate from the Department of Labor. So this is something you have to do in advance and get this kind of set up. But how cool is that? They might help you, like I said, recruit talent. So you might get good talent recruited in and get a tax credit. And so this sounds like a pretty cool thing. If I was in New York, I would be looking at this for sure. Looks like you can get a maximum credit of $7,500. That's not chump change to get back on just one person. So I definitely highlight this one. Take a look at that one if you're in business in New York. All right, we have, let's go to, we have the recovery tax credit. And it says this is a new credit. This is, again, a refundable credit. We like those. And let's see, it has been, criteria is you have an eligible individual that has worked a minimum of 500 hours for you. Credit doesn't exceed $2,000 per individual. It can only be claimed one time per individual. And let's see, the recovery tax credit is $1 for each hour worked by an eligible individual beginning with the date of hire. Now this one is a refundable credit. Again, here's the catch. It says it has to be certified by the New York State Office of Addiction Services and supports and employs eligible individuals in recovery from a substance use disorder in part-time and full-time positions in New York State. So I can tell you that in my experience, people that are trying to come out of addiction, if they're really coming out of it and they don't go back, they can be some of your best employees. They can be people that work very hard. They're very grateful to not be sick anymore or to have things under control. I don't know what the term is, but that's really cool. And if you're one of those people that likes to make a difference, that's a cool place to go, because my understanding is that people coming off addiction, if you give them a really great place to work and give them some purpose, you're actually improving their chances of not relapsing. So this one's cool. This one has my vote of approval. All right, we have the Rehabilitation of Historic Properties Credit. Again, rehabilitation of historic properties. I think too that sometimes I'll see, well, I shouldn't say I think sometimes, I do see investments in different real estate partnerships, like private partnerships, that will rehabilitate a historic building and then convert it into multi-housing real estate, right? Piece of as an asset class. And they will grab a lot of these tax credits as part of the returns to the investors in these things. So keep an eye out for something like that, because I've seen those pay off very nicely for investors, where they might get a 15% return, and then now it becomes a 30% return with the tax credits on top of it. Okay, so just kind of maybe a trick of the trade of some of these private real estate investors. All right, we have the Security Officers Training Tax Credit. We have the Special Additional Mortgage Recording Tax Credit. Not sure what that is. It sounds like something you probably just get in a certain, it sounds like you get it in a closing on a piece of real estate, and if your closing attorney doesn't know about it, they should. Let's see, we've got the Startup New York program, and they have the Startup New York Tax Elimination Credit and the Startup New York Telecommunications Services Excise Tax Credit. The Tax Elimination Credit is, let's say, okay, so if you want this, it's a refundable credit. Again, a lot of refundable credits in New York, wow. It has to be approved by the Empire State Development, ESD, we talked about that a little bit earlier in this video, to participate in the Startup New York program. And you have to receive a form DTF-74, which is a certificate of eligibility from your campus sponsor. You have to operate in a tax-free New York area. I'm assuming that's not New York City. You have to create and maintain net new jobs, and you have to meet the annual employment test. I'm not sure what that is. I have to dig into that. But this looks really neat. I mean, this looks like, to me, if you're graduating from school and coming out and you want to start up, this is a little bit of a kind of get you off the launch pad type program. So if you're thinking of starting a new business, I would look at this entire program. And so I would Google like startup. So it's start-up New York NY program or tax elimination credit or something like that, and take a look at it, because they might have, a lot of them are kind of incubator programs, and the tax credits are just part of that incubator program. But it looks like they've got some resources here for you, and looks like some financial assistance. Probably have grants too, I would assume. All right, they have the last two are the taxi cabs, and I'm going to say this wrong. Livery service. I'm sure I'm embarrassing myself, but anyway, credit for taxi cabs and livery service vehicles accessible to persons with disabilities. So that's pretty self-explanatory. It says the credit's equal to the incremental cost of basically getting the vehicle upgraded for that type of service, and you can get $10,000 per vehicle, so it's not chump change. And you can also get $10,000 per vehicle for a purchase of new vehicles that are manufactured for this purpose. So that's kind of interesting. This is a non-refundable credit, so you have to owe tax to actually use it, but it's still a pretty big credit. All right, and then the last one is the Workers with Disabilities Tax Credit. This is basically, for employers that employ people with disabilities. Okay, so if you think about this, from just a practical standpoint, for some reason, God, I hope I don't say anything that's not politically correct here, but for some reason, people seem to have a negative connotation to the thing with people with disabilities. But disability might be that they lost their legs or something, or they just, it doesn't affect their mind, right? I mean, there's a lot, there's some really brilliant people that you can hire in this area, and so I don't look at it as that you're doing anything necessarily as a saint, or that you're doing something where you're taking a haircut on something and that this tax credit is compensating you for that. I look at it as an opportunity to hire somebody with a great mind and give them a hand up, just because other people might be biased against them for some God knows reason. No reason to be biased against anybody that has a disability. And I would also wonder if a lot of veterans have disabilities, right? Just by the nature of what they've done. And so double dip on that credit, right? So you might find somebody who, is going to be the best employee you've ever hired, but they happen to be in an accident in Iraq or something, but it doesn't affect their job. I mean, come on. Great, give me 2 tax credits. I'll double dip on that, right? So anyway, and sometimes I think when you're looking at a lot of these credits, just as kind of a wrap up note here, is sometimes these credits give you ideas, right? So ideas about what you could do in your business, and you say, oh, in theory, the tax credits and tax incentives are trying to drive behavior, right? So they're using the tax system to incentivize certain behaviors, right? And whether that's effective or not is a whole different area. You can get a PhD in that type of subject as to tax policy and whatnot. People go really deep into that stuff and get philosophical. But suffice to say, all of these credits give you ideas about things you could do to improve your business, build diversity, get more involved in the community. So I would encourage anybody, not just for New York, but any state, whoever's watching this, look through your state tax credits, because a lot of them give you an idea of the political climate in your state, which can be helpful for lots of reasons. They can show you, what they're trying to further in the state, so you can become more part of the community and become part of the solution, right? Aligning yourself with some of the legislators, okay? It's always a good thing. But also some of them give you some creative ideas about some things you could do or try, right? So if you look at this and go, man, an apprenticeship program, I could hire somebody really smart out. If I was in New York, I could hire somebody really smart out of Columbia or something like that, and they're still at an age or I could hire somebody who's in grad school, in New York and in New York City, obviously great world-class schools there, and get a huge tax credit here. They win and I win, right? So sometimes this gives you ideas of things to do. At least it does for me, and I'm assuming a lot of other people out there that own businesses or entrepreneurs would think similarly about this. So look at it and see what kind of ideas it gives you, because you never know what kind of creative things you can come up with when you start looking at these tax credits. Okay, so tons of credits. I read off the ones that were the business tax credits, and I went into a few of them kind of a little bit deeper, but suffice to say, going deep into all of these credits is way beyond the scope of this. But if you heard anything that resonated with you, let me know, send me a question. If you live in New York State or you're a tax professional or a business owner that's done anything like this, please share your experience. If you would, not mind clicking the like on, or making some sort of comment on this video to get in front of more people, I believe, so that they can see it. But what we want to do is get this in front of people so they know that these things are out there, so we can support small business and put more money in people's pockets, okay? So they can reinvest it in their business and make the world a better place. All right, so that's it for New York. Tomorrow I'm gonna do North Carolina and another original 13 colony. So we'll see what we come up with there. And until then, I will say goodbye and have a great night.